This video has been brought to you by NordVPN. Loki has heard what you've been saying about him, and he isn't happy. And yes, this anger is actually canonical. Ever since the release of my video on woke American comics versus manga, there's been one odd counterclaim that has occasionally continued to rear its head. The claim that Marvel's Loki was not actually turned into an example of woke writing in regard to certain new developments in his personality added by Kate Herron, the director of the Loki television series. To quote, "From the moment I joined Loki, it was very important to me and my goal to acknowledge Loki was bisexual. It is part of who he is and who I am too." Why yes, didn't you know that little fact about Loki? Or are you a bigot? Though the last line there is fairly telling, because no, sexuality of any kind was never really an aspect of the Loki we saw in the movies. He was far too busy being evil. And the writers of early Marvel cinema were likely too busy asking how Loki's next evil scheme would ramp up the stakes, rather than asking if he was into hand-holding. I had initially used this quote as an example of woke ideals, that is, politically biased performative morals needlessly creeping their way into media where audience members just want to see a good guy defeat a bad guy, because woke writing really isn't a list of topics or elements, but a style of writing, with being terrible being its defining trait. Where traditional media plays character and story as their focus, Kate Herron decided to push a fashionable political topic as the main element. A political topic that added something new to a central character, not for narrative reasons, but purely for performative politics. Traditionally, deeper topics and issues are added to enhance a story, but when the story is thrown together to promote a deeper topic or issue, it becomes a problem. Normally this results in something like a Mary Sue, but when the topics and issues are political, the work usually becomes political propaganda. And when the work becomes corporate political propaganda, the work is normally considered woke. For example, a good story might star a female character because they might want to explore a topic from a female perspective, kind of like Silence of the Lambs. Remember this movie? Became legendary, came out in 1991, before the major 2020 era of performative diversity. The movie followed Clarice Starling, a female character, as she trained to enter the FBI, a normally male-dominated profession. Yet, Clarice Starling faced off against the devious Hannibal Lecter, tracked down Buffalo Bill, and overcame every obstacle she came across using her wits and strength of character. A bad story might star a female character because the writer thinks men are big dumb meanieheads, and just wants to write a power fantasy, where all the men arrogantly scoff at the female character while secretly being like totally jelly over her super cool powers. And she easily dominates all the obstacles she comes across, not through hard work, but because she's just that awesome. And the story isn't about her growth, but showing all the meaniehead men that she's better than them at man things. Fantastic. In other words, elements often championed by woke writers have been in successful works for decades. For example, Disney's animated Mulan movie also stars a female protagonist who joins the army, an action forbidden to women. A woman doing things traditionally associated with men is peak woke premise. But the animated Mulan doesn't join the army out of some odd political vendetta against men, or as a protest against social discrimination or against tradition, but out of loyalty and love for her father and family. Mulan heroically risks her life, so her wounded father wouldn't have to. However, this time, politics wasn't the main issue. The main issue was a common retort that Loki was indeed bisexual, as Kate Herron claimed, and that her desired portrayal of Loki was, in fact, not a political point. And the typical point of proof, repeatedly mentioned for Loki's bisexuality, is the mere fact he once gave birth to a horse, which is just silly. That's like saying Thor was into men because he agreed to be some dude's bride once. On second thought, this might require some further context. There we go, that was for not telling me the ending to Game of Thrones. By the way, this video takeover is made possible by Nord, a VPN that not only protects me from the deluge of devious devils wanting to barge their way into my most important and personal files, but lets me dance around those pesky little country restrictions and access all my favorite content anywhere in the world, or other world in this case. Literature Angel, I knew you were behind this. How did you get back here? Apparently you have me listed as favorite content. Not anymore. I can just switch to one of over 5,000 servers in over 50 countries and avoid the prying eyes of evil. And good luck catching me, because Nord links lets me avoid buffering and access all my real favorite movies and shows with security and amazing speed. Nord is much more than a mere VPN and a secret key to all the best media. It also guards you from malware, dangerous files, and malicious annoying ads with just one simple click. Hey, looks like you were right. Check out the description below to not only try out NordVPN risk risk-free for 30 days with an exclusive discount. Now you can get 4 months absolutely free on a 2-year plan, along with that 30-day money-back guarantee. Anyway, now that that's taken care of, first, the answer is yes. Loki did in fact give birth to a horse. In fact, the horse's name is Sleipnir, a distinguished stallion that would go on to become Odin's famous 8-legged steed. However, when it comes to the often silly adventures of the Norse gods, not everything is always so simple. Let's go over the entire story, and you can come to your own conclusion about Loki's sexuality. The story of Loki giving birth to a horse is actually the story of the Master Builder, a story which took place in the early years of Asgard, late enough that the moon and the sun have been set in the sky, but early enough that Asgard was far from the grand citadel we picture today, a fact that really hit home when Thor traveled to the east in search of adventure, an absence that led the other gods to realize Asgard had been left utterly defenseless. Thor at this time was the heart of their fighting force, and having lost the bulk of their fighting force, Odin feared the word would spread of their vulnerability and tempt the hostile hands of their enemies. To quote Odin from Neil Gaiman's Norse Mythology, "We can't always rely on Thor. We need protection. Giants will come. Trolls will come." Heimdall asked Odin what he would propose, to which Odin responded with an answer so reasonable, civilizations have since come to the same answer for thousands of years. Odin commanded the construction of a big, beautiful wall, high enough to keep out frost giants, thick enough that not even the strongest troll could batter its way through. Such an order was one thing to give, but another to carry out. Such a magnificent wall would take far too long to construct and require a level of skill they did not possess. A wall unbreakable by trolls and unscalable by giants is quite the tall order. Building the Great Wall seemed hopeless, until a boastful builder came along offering to build a wall worthy of Asgard. And he would do it in a mere 3 seasons, or about a year and a half. And if this builder could deliver on everything he promised, the gods would have their wall. Of course, the mysterious master builder didn't work for free. In return for this magnificent wall, the builder wished for 3 things: marriage to Freya, the goddess of beauty, the sun, and the moon. Naturally, the gods knew this was total nonsense. The builder was literally asking for the sun and the moon, not to mention Freya. The gods gathered, far away from the ears of the master builder, and discussed the matter. Naturally, they agreed to send the man off, possibly with a savage beating at Freya's request. Then someone offered a counterpoint, and that someone was Loki, because of course it was Loki, and in true college slacker fashion, immediately concocted a plan to scam their master builder into building their wall for free. Loki proposed they make a wager with the master builder. The gods of Asgard would agree to give him Freya and grant him the sun and the moon. However, the payment would only be granted if the master builder agreed to construct the wall with no additional help and have the wall completed in 1 season instead of 3. If the master builder failed to complete the task by summer, he would leave unpaid. Oddly enough, the master builder agreed with one small condition of his own. He requested that his horse Svaldolfari assist in hauling the stone to the wall. The gods agreed, thinking nothing of the request. And a quick season later, the big beautiful wall is on schedule to be completed right on time. The builder and the gods had sworn unbreakable oaths. Both sides must deliver on their end of the bargain, and neither could cheat or interfere with the other. So, needless to say, the gods weren't very happy. Obviously, the builder was no mere mortal man, but a giant in disguise. As the gods lamented over how they've been swindled, all eyes suddenly landed back on Loki. And if the gods are going to lose Freya, the moon, and the entire sun, they could at least make the one responsible pay with his life. The oaths may have protected the builder from their wrath. Odin made it quite clear that Loki would take the full brunt of their godly rage the very instant the wall was complete. To put it bluntly, Loki would suffer a very painful and very humiliating death. Suddenly, Loki was presented with a choice. He could either wait to die or figure out a way to hinder the builder's progress without breaking their oath, which meant no direct interference at all. No killing or wounding, no crippling the horse, no trees or boulders suddenly blocking the road. See where this is going? In summary, Loki was left with only one option. The only reason why the builder could build with such impressive speed was because of Svaldolfari the super horse. Without his magnificent steed, the builder would never be able to finish the wall before summer. So, under the threat of succeed or die, Loki cleverly transformed himself into a female horse. One Svaldolfari clearly found attractive because he immediately gave chase. With Svaldolfari off doing things far too unsavory for YouTube, mainly Loki, the master builder was unable to finish the wall. The confrontation ended just as Loki had planned. Freya, the sun, and the moon remained with the gods, and Asgard got most of its wall. And what happened to Loki? To quote Neil Gaiman's Norse Mythology, Loki stayed away for the best part of a year, and when he showed up again, he was accompanied by a gray foal. It was a beautiful foal, soul, although it had 8 legs instead of the usual 4. And it followed Loki wherever he went, and nuzzled him, and treated Loki as if he were its mother, which of course was the case. The horse grew into a horse called Sleipnir, a huge gray stallion. Loki presented Sleipnir to Odin as a gift. When the idea of Loki giving birth to Sleipnir is brought up in defense of Kate Herron's choices, this little fact is often dropped as if Loki was just thirsty one day and really needed nourishment from a girthy stallion. But within context, this is far from the case. And in the same vein, I can just hear the argument for Thor now.
Actually, Thor being into men aligns pretty well with the original mythology. I mean, in one story, he was the bride of a giant. You heard me right, dude bros. Thor was the bride. Hashtag current year. Hashtag sorry, not sorry.
Again, at first glance, this sounds like the mean old devils and dude bros would be having a knee-jerk reaction, and we must certainly concede the point. Obviously, Fujoshi21 knows more about Norse mythology than we do, and totally didn't just read the wiki or something. And if modern writers suddenly choose to switch Thor's proclivities, despite Thor, icon of masculinity, canonically being married to Sif, icon of femininity, in the original mythology, how could we argue against such a change? After all, Thor really did agree to marry a man, and Thor really did attend as the bride, technically. Once again, the situation's a little more complicated than Thor was the bride once. In fact, the real story is less a romance and more of a wacky comedy, which is par for the course with the Norse gods. Don't get me started on the hilarity of Baldur's death. First, the groom wasn't a giant, but an ogre. And not just any ogre, but Thrym, lord of the ogres. And Thrym didn't actually want to marry Thor, but Freya, goddess of beauty. Thrym had stolen Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. In exchange for the hammer's return, he demanded the hand of the beautiful Freya. But Freya refused, not wanting to spend her life bound to a beastly ogre just because Thor was too careless with his favorite toy. So, with Freya out of the question, the plan switched to, let's put Thor in a bridal gown and pretend he's Freya, which worked somehow, despite Thor maintaining his luxurious beard and having the appetite of Goku. Though it did raise a few eyebrows when Freya was devouring whole oxen and downing entire barrels of mead on her own. But the ruse succeeded, Thor got his hammer back, and he proceeded to murder everyone. Not quite the love story slash fic writers were hoping for. As we've seen time and again in this Disney era of media, accuracy and respect for a franchise's legacy are mere afterthoughts, things to pay lip service to, with any evidence pushed to justify their choices, carefully cut from its context to make a fan's reasonable outrage at the destruction of something they love look unreasonable, and then have someone who needed to read the wiki that morning just to know the main character's name smugly smile in your face and tell you that the franchise you invested money in, created memories with, forged friendships around, and spent years or possibly decades immersed in was always like this. And there's literally no difference between the thing you loved for years and the modern incarnation that you despise. That you're only angry because you're a bad person. Ultimately, this whole matter with Loki is left for you to decide. Was the story of Sleipnir's birth what you thought it was, or none at all? And Loki may very well be as Kate Herron said, and that Loki seducing a stallion under the threat of death really does inform us of his proclivities. But I'll end this off by reading Loki's feelings about the whole affair. Again, from Neil Gaiman's Norse Mythology. Many people would admire Odin's horse, but only a brave man would ever mention its parentage in Loki's presence, and nobody ever dared to allude to it twice. Loki would go out of his way to make your life unpleasant if he heard you talking about how he lured Svafalfari away from its master, and how he rescued the gods from his own bad idea. And Loki nursed his resentments.